am so pleased to have all of you here today. And before I introduce our special, incredible guest, Kat Haber. Oh, hi, Michaela. I was going to just make a few announcements and invite, both Kat and I are here to invite and welcome all of your questions, not only your questions, but your input that you have on the subject of climate change and, and how climate change and food, what we eat, are so interconnected and so related. And so really, this is a time for you guys who are here. This is a time for everybody to engage and to bring your knowledge and your wisdom forward on this discussion. It is such a broad topic, and there's amazing people out there championing this topic. And one of them happens to be Kat Haber. So in this recording and in this talk, we're going to be mentioning quite a few links, so things that Kat's done, things that I'm doing, and things that other incredible people are doing. And Tel is going to be putting those links in the chat, and then they will also go in our Facebook group. And the one thing I like to remind us all is we want to do, as Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only way things ever have. And we're a small group, and this Living Like the Future Matters, doing a dose of positivity, is growing. We have a lineup of speakers coming over the next 2 months, almost every week, really exciting speakers in the field of health and wellness and social and environmental justice. And I want to invite you, Tel's going to put in the link if you haven't already. Fill out the immune system building culinary class we're doing, which is really awesome. We want your input. And also, I'm going to be giving away a free 50 pages of Living Like the Future Matters, my book, and we'll talk more about that at the end. But I think that this is a good time to just take a minute. I like to do this at the beginning of each session, where we just take a minute and just breathe quietly to ourselves and remind ourselves when we live in the past, it can be depressing, and when we are so living in the future, it can be very anxious times. So bringing ourselves present is a gift. And as we breathe throughout the course of the day, reminding ourselves of the many gifts and blessings we have. And thank you so much for being present with me here with Omicron off the charts, and the battle between the vax and the non-vax, and the battle of the politicians and everything going on in the world. We want to forget. Hi, Kenny's in the house. Kenny's one of our guests coming up in a couple of weeks. He's amazing. Another fellow Alaskan Washington person. But, and I want to thank you all for that reminder of the gift of being present. And with that, like Shannon Kelly, our wonderful guest last week, she reminded us all that, hi, Kenny, so good to see you, that freedom lies on the other side of fear. And with that said, if you have something that you're feeling fearful about, or you're feeling even positive about, either put it in the chat or raise your hand and come in, and let's, that's what this is about. And Kat is here to answer questions. And so am I, to find solace, to bring us all closer together so we can all live like the future matters and feel more motivated to go out and do something about food justice and climate justice. So food justice and climate justice, and looking at how our food affects our carbon footprint, and how our eating patterns affect climate change. And why, when we look at it, are our diets so carbon intensive? Where's that coming from? Is that a corporate choice or your choice? And how eating low on the food chain makes a ubiquitous difference. So without further ado, this is my time and greatest joy and pleasure to introduce you to this week's guest on A Dose of Positivity, someone I've known for about 25 years, who's definitely living like the future matters. Kat, I want you to just say hi to everyone. And before I give your bio, that's Kat right there. Kat Haber, and I'm just going to read her bio. It's very fun. I had to shorten it a little, but you'll learn more about her. And she will also put her links in that chat too, and actually tells where he put some. But Kat is the founder of Trust Climate Action Strategies. She helps influencers, activists activate climate solutions in their lives in fun and empowering ways. Trust me, she is fun. She takes a hard subject and turns it into a very, very, very palatable and digestible form. And that is something that is a gift that we wish more of these scientists could bring to the table. She has been a TEDx organizer since 2009, and thanks to Kat, I have done 2 TEDx talks. Yay. one on climate and divesting from fossil fuels in Alaska. She is a climate reality leader mentor since 2013. And in 2014, this is my favorite thing, Kat walked across the United States of America in the Great March for Climate Action from LA to DC. And she was arrested. This beautiful person, oh, she has a great story about this. But anyway, she has served on the Wild Foundation board of directors for 15 years, helping to protect endangered habitat around the world. Kat is a world peace advocate, and she is also active in We Rotary Club International, inspiring teens and young professionals for world wilderness conservation. She served on the board for Wild for 15 years. And in 2020, during the lockdown, some of us, most of the people who I know on this call were very busy. She and her team curated and produced 28 countdown COVID clues, climate action, local impact online conversations with elders, youth, indigenous, expats, CEOs, NGO executives. And needless to say, Kat is a soul sister and a wonderful human. And I want to welcome her to this A Dose of Positivity, and all of you. I thank you so much for being here today. So, Kat.
That's such a kind introduction, Donna. Thank you so much.
Wow, it doesn't do you justice, honey. So just a reminder to all of you who are on, put your comments in the chat for Kat now that you know who she is. And Kat, I would like to start out just asking a couple of questions to get the things moving here. And actually just one question, and then I'm going to let you just kind of take it from there and share what you have to say, and we'll just have a conversation about this. And we've got Robin Richardson in the house from Global Food Collaborative, and she is going to be one of our guests in the future. And she knows a tremendous amount about what's going on in relation to food and climate as well. So Robin, we'll love to hear from you too. So Kat, first question for you is, how can our food choices reduce the ecological and climate crisis? What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, my guess is, Donna, this is something that has been part of your foundational set of values and principles. I'm sure that you've been talking about eating seasonally, eating low to the ground, if possible, eating food that you have raised yourself, reducing processed foods. When we walked across the country in the Great March for Climate Action, the first task that I was given was to go get food for our first day on the march. the first day, it rained and rained and rained from Los Angeles, from the poor town of Wilmington near Long Beach Port. So I got hypothermic. I was scared. The only map that we had was on my phone. My phone battery didn't last the full amount. I thought, oh my goodness, Dorothy, we are not in Kansas anymore. So I was happy to take on the task. We all did everything every day. So that was my first task. And there in Wilmington was a food desert. I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but basically there is nothing living in a food desert. Everything is wrapped in plastic. You are hard pressed to find any fresh fruit or vegetables. Dairy, it's like Fritos and Mountain Dew. And that certainly, when I brought that back to our crowd and said, this is the best I could do, they were shocked. And all along the way, we noticed that in suburban areas, poor communities that were often situated next to coal ash piles from coal power plants or landfills, often they would have very poor sources of food. So we're very lucky, especially you, Donna, there on the Big Island. You're growing so many gorgeous foods every day. I mean, there it is. Look at those.
Today's food, not flour.
What do you have right there? Maybe you can tell us what you are.
Well, this is, believe it or not, one of our oranges and another orange tails, but everything is grown and regenerative and totally nutrient dense organic soil. These are avocados. And then I don't know, but a lot of people probably haven't seen this, but this is turmeric. We just pulled this out of the ground, and a super immune system building, anti-inflammatory, microbial rich, nutrient dense roots. And actually next week, Dr. Harvey Eckhart is going to be going over all the immune system building things. But yeah, Kat, this is so exciting. I love that you're talking about this. And I want to just bring some light on this subject. When I first met Kat like 25 years ago, she was not necessarily the cleanest eater. It was a lot influenced by her family, but it is incredible because she did this climate march, and I want to, and saw all this. And I would love for you to share with people how you changed your diet, like what triggered this big transformation, and how you're eating now in regards to climate justice and food desert and all of the things that.
Well, when I got COVID in March of 2020, that really intensified my adoration for fruits and vegetables. I had before, but this was a concentrated thing where my body just craved that for the immune system to regenerate itself. So I think I had been a vegetarian before I got married. I've been married for 32 years. But my husband's a big meat eater, so that influenced how we raised our son. But now it's very refreshing to have fruits, vegetables, very little sugar, very little carbs, eating on a regular schedule, lots of water, very few drinks. Those kind of things are just natural now. And when you compare those to a meat eater's diet, which takes about 16 times as much land to produce food as a vegan diet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the methane and everything from the cows. And I'm going to say right now, I am not a vegan or a vegetarian. I am a 80-20 gal. So I do believe that we all have to make those choices, but realizing that with every bite we take, one bite at a time, it does make a huge difference to the people who are living in the food deserts. And actually, I'd like to speak a little bit about food justice, Kat, with you, and the other things that you saw when you walked across the country, when you went to these poorer areas, and that were, a lot of them maybe even in agricultural centers, places where they're raising these cattle inhumanely with feedlots, and seeing the energy intensive of that, and also huge fields, crops, farming where they're using till farming and exploiting the soil. Like, you saw a lot when you went across the country, and I noticed after you got back, you changed your eating so hugely from that time.
Yeah. So part of the witnessing of being in conversation with people across the country 8 years ago was hearing a lot of people who were not really understanding the concept of climate. They were seeing and recognizing that weather was changing, the hydrology was changing. There might have been more or less water than what was traditional. The wind patterns were shifting, the temperatures were rising, but few people then were really connecting the dots. And certainly very few people were connecting the dots between climate breakdown and food shifts in yields, in the health of the food itself. So I spent a lot of time listening and really hearing what people were saying and noticing that the dots were not getting connected. So when we were moving from community to community, there might be farmers, there might be business people. I would often speak with mayors and policy decision makers. We would try to meet with Rotary clubs. We would often stay at churches and community places, and also stay with locals so that we could engage in a deeper dialogue. And people were curious. We were quite an anomaly. We were like this weird parade of green hippies walking through with signs saying, you know, climate change is happening now. Take care of Mother Nature. I mean, all kinds of these things. There's no planet B. Well, those were really weird things to a lot of people in Middle America. But Middle America is also a place where a lot of our food comes from, especially the feed and grain, the soy, the corn that is used to feed our cattle and our dairy cows. And the cost of that to the climate is massive. And if you want me to show some of the data from that, Donna, I'm happy to, but it won't be a happy current reality. It will be a shocking current reality.
Yeah, you know what, Kat, let's stay on a dose of positivity, but I would like, if anybody's interested, Kat, I'll ask you to share that data on the Facebook group. And so people can have access to that. And I also have a lecture from 2 PhDs on climate change and food justice that I just posted up there with some of that, these facts that are chilling. And I think that if we can gear this conversation to being how, and anybody who's on, I saw Amber's on here too. I'm super excited about that. Hi, Amber. But the things that we can do, and the things that you're doing, how you're empowering these young people, I would love for you to share the insight that you have from and tell everybody here what these young people are doing, and how, and then turning the conversation back around how we can support these young people, that whole intergenerational thing. So please go with that, honey.
So in those 28 online conversations, pause, countdown, COVID clues, climate acts, local impacts, we engaged in every single one of those 28 conversations: youth, Indigenous elder, a local leader, and a nonprofit. And the intent of that was to create a conversation where we could hear from each other's perspectives. So often we get kind of siloed in all of us being the same. And I just felt that youth had the energy and the innovation and the incentive to change the way we are living in Earth.
Tired of the blah, blah, blah. Tired of the blah, blah, and the
Greta,
blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Greta.
right.
Right?
Greta's blah, 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 right. And then Indigenous elders are desperate to connect with the young people. They know they're reaching their end times, and they have such important wisdom to share with upcoming leaders, because the way that we have lived is not going to support life moving forward. We have a very short window according to Indigenous elders. And so I am linking elders and youth in an ongoing conversation. And the way we're doing that right now is through Living Brightly. We have gathered 15 to 19-year-olds from around the world, and we are engaging in a dozen conversations like food, energy, leadership, youth, fashion, consumerism, water, earth. And once a week, we are meeting with them, going into a deep dive. We've just finished a 3-day climate activation where they calculated their own carbon footprint. They learned many of these values about living close to the ground, understanding their place in the world. So based on that, we've got the youth, we've got the elders, and then we want to bring women and girls into the conversation. According to my Indigenous guides, it is now time for women to stand strong and speak boldly. This is not a time for us to shrink. We need to bring life onto the planet. We know what it is to bring life through our bodies, whether or not we have given birth. We have all of the things in place in our biology to be able to do that. And now is the moment. So we'll bring youth, Indigenous, women and girls, and then finally we'll bring the business community in, because that is where the economic engine lives right now. I've invented a word called economology, which means an ecology that is based with a balanced economy. Right now, our economy, as you can see, is way out of balance. We have very few people who own the vast amount of resources and a vast amount of humans on the planet who have very little to live on. That's just the human side of it. The wildlife side is even more skewed. We've lost 90% of the large species in our oceans. So, and then it continues with insects, it continues with the base of the marine food chain. It continues with the elementals and the way in which our hydrology moves. You may have heard of atmospheric rivers recently. Well, that is all changing based on what's happening in the Amazon. Nothing is separate. All of these topics are connected, and we ourselves also need to remember that we are connected, not only within ourselves, our head, our heart, our hands, but also for we women to experience that pain, that deep giving birthness, to really recognize how badly Earth needs us to reimagine and rebirth the nature of life on the planet right now. So yeah, does that answer your question, Donna?
Yeah, it sounds like you read my books. living like the future matters, conscious cures. And it's so good. I love having soul sisters totally in alignment and who can articulate it so beautifully like that. Kat, you're amazing. And I'm so grateful that there are champions out there, not just talking about it like you're doing it with your Living Brightly and all the activities that you're doing. And when you think about a dose of positivity for anybody who's on the call who isn't right now active in or engaging in some kind of social, humanitarian, ecological endeavor, it is now is the time, whether, like Kat was saying, whether you're an elder or you're 17 years old, we can't expect the young people to clean up the mess that we have made or past generations. And I'm not talking about but we all have our place in this, because one bite at a time, we make a difference with our food choices. And that's just a simple act of kindness that we can do each and every day when we go to the store. Is it wrapped in plastic? And like when Robin Richardson comes on, she's going to be talking about the value chain and the source and the energy that it takes to bring from farm to actually our entire digestive system, because the pharmaceutical companies get a hold of us right after it goes in our mouths. And then we're talking about the antacids and all of the things that go on compounding, just trying to help us eliminate that toxic waste out of our bodies, which goes back into the food chain. And it's got to stop. Like Kat was saying, we have a limited amount of time. There's scientists out there reminding us all the time that we have 60 years of arable farmland left. And so, yeah, we want to do vertical farming. We want to eat hydroponics, produce foods, but we're not getting the nutrients that we need. We've already seen that happening with the increase in epilepsy and all ADHD and all these chronic diseases that our young children, the diabetes rate of children is 50% or something. It's like absurd. Children, I mean, juvenile diabetes has never used to even be a word. And now because of this, our children are suffering. And once we clean up our diets, that's 50% of the problem right there, to reducing the climate change right there. That is where the biggest problem is, even greater than the exhaust that comes out of our cars, is our agricultural system. So Kat, I'd love to have you talk about things that you have, learned from, especially these indigenous elders. Like, do they talk about, like one of the things I know is like when buffaloes roamed, and they used every part of the animal, and their hoofs were their natural tillers of the land, and they ate the meat, and then they could raise things and the manure. And I mean, there was that beautiful permaculture cycle that goes with that, but we didn't have the methane and the toxicity that we see with the food system. Everything from, you mentioned earlier, dairy, our chicken, our beef, everything coming from that. So you got it?
Forgive that interruption. Yeah, so what could we imagine if in 8 years we were able to radically rethink our food and the way that we produce it, the way that we treat the soils, the way that we share it, the way that we, the taste of food that has just come out of your garden is incredibly different than the taste of food that's been shipped halfway across the world, wrapped in plastic. And so how much of that food cost is actually not even the food production itself, but just moving it to get it to your table. So thinking about embedded carbon is a piece of considering this linkage between climate change and food. So proximity of production counts, all of the things that you can do to bring your food closer to the ground. As Kuhyuk is an Anungan elder who's been convening the, and I'll put the link for this in the chat, the Wisdom Weavers of the World. In 2017, I believe he brought maybe a dozen or so elders from around the world. And from that, he delivered to me the message that we need to eat, we need to stay low to the ground. And so I've really been asking myself that question, what does that mean in so many ways? And I didn't really understand this, Donna, I'm embarrassed to admit, until I was 9 months in isolation, long hauling and recovering from COVID. My personal carbon footprint went from 13 down to 3 when I stopped flying. And so that's another aspect of staying low to the ground, isn't it? Instead of all of that energy to move me around the planet by planes, I really have not been doing that. And before COVID, I was looking around to see what's the government doing. I attended the Conference of the Parties in 2015 in Paris when everyone was so ebullient that every single nation in the world signed the Paris Climate Accord based on NDCs, nationally determined contributions. Well, here we are 8 years later, and we aren't nearly as close to where we need to be from that. So that is to say that I was looking around seeing, okay, who's solving the problem? And what I realized was we were getting closer and closer to the end of the time where these systems were breaking down. And living in Alaska, we had ocean acidification, we had villages falling into the ocean, we had permafrost melting, we had peat sequestration declining, we had ocean acidification, we had glaciers receding. I saw this every single day, and I'm looking around and going, nobody is either recognizing it, or those who have decision-making ability in policy were not doing anything about it. In fact, they were doing the opposite. Instead of taking action on it, they were denying it. Now there's a little bit of warming to it, and instead of denying, they're delaying it. Well, guess what? Delay and denial are the same dang thing. It all leads to death for life on the planet. So we need to be urgently taking action, and I can't look around and see who else is doing that. I have to learn those lessons myself. Now, there are those who believe that and it was true, the carbon footprint calculation was an invention by the oil and gas industry to divert responsibility from them for the toxification of our atmosphere. That's true. But what other tool do I have as an individual? I am thinking, but I can change things in my own way. And that's what I encourage everyone who is listening today. If you're a human being, guess what? You eat food. So learn from Donna and her guests how to implement these ideas, because the wiser we are in making our decisions with food and water and moving and energy, all of those things will contribute. It might not seem like a lot if it's just one person, but one person times 7.9 billion current humans on the planet, now that might make a difference. There's a few other things we could do, like having a Nuremberg trial for the 100 people who are destroying the Amazon rainforest. We could be implementing policies that are urgently stopping oil, gas, fracking, and coal. These things are not only polluting our lands and soils, but they're also disrupting our hydrology. It takes 5 to 7 million gallons of water to frack a well. These things, when you add them up, they all have an impact on the way we live and the way we eat.
Oh, Kat, that is so awesome. And COVID is a blessing in disguise. I mean, we know the science is out there that when people were locked down, especially in early COVID, I mean, there were kangaroos walking in the streets and wildlife was coming out everywhere. The oceans were cleaner, the air was cleaner, CO2 levels dropped dramatically, even in just a short time. And so it's just interesting how Mother Nature is giving us all a wake up and time to reflect on everything that you just delivered in such an articulate way. A Nuremberg trial for these corporate entities that are, it's almost like, I don't even want to say a Nazi regime or something, but it's really trying to I don't know, there is an underlying really, without thinking conspiracy theories here, I'm not a conspiracist, I like to look at all sides of the coin, but I definitely so sincerely believe that this, like what we're doing here with a dose of positivity, what you're doing with Brightly, what Robin's doing with Global Food Collaborative, and what so many other people are doing is these small tribes, the wheels are starting to turn. And while we're in this virtual world that we're living in, these connections are becoming more and more important all the time. And the thing that I think that I feel, I just want to express this, Kat, and then I want to ask you a couple more questions that I have been thinking is, and I'd like you all to think about this. Nobody wants mandates, nobody wants us telling what to do, and I get that, and I don't get that. Like you said, we got to act now, we got to act fast. But are we willing to live with 50% energy? Are we willing not to fly for maybe 5-10 years? Are we willing to totally reduce our meat consumption in half or eliminate? Are we willing to drive our cars 50% less? Are we willing to turn all our lights off at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, no lights? Are we willing to only eat things that are low on the food chain?
I just want to say, what if
Yeah.
we could accomplish all of the things that we wanted to do with all of those actions, but had a very, very low carbon impact? I am now communicating with you halfway around the world. I could have flown over there, but instead I'm having an intimate conversation with 4, 8, 12, 15 people, most of whom I didn't know. So instead of having to go there, I can have the conversation here. What if we had regenerative agriculture in such a way it was so healthy and nourishing that we radically reduced our health costs? What if we had renewable energy so ubiquitous that every single structure in the world was built embodied with its own self-generating energy source? And then what if we had so much energy that our ability to be imaginative and creative would create so much abundance that the possibility for life and light on the planet were incredibly exponentially advanced? So rather than thinking about, okay, if we want to get to a healthy place on the planet, we've got to give up all these things. I prefer to look at what is it that I'm trying to accomplish by doing that thing, and how could I do it in another way that would be less damaging to the planet, but bringing more life into my life. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense. And I think we're on the same page with that. But I also feel like a lot of people are out there doing things that they want to do, like go to huge concerts and litter the world with their, I mean, the mess after these things. I mean, people want to do these things. So you can do it all run solar or all run wind, but it takes fossil fuels to generate all these alternative energies. I think that the
Just
discussion
right
or
now, just right now, just in this moment, what if
yes,
we were able to understand how to do battery storage in a way that we don't have to have fracked gas peaker plants to stabilize our renewable generation? But let me say this, my elders also tell me this, that we will not innovate with technology our way out of this. We first need to be thinking from our heart, and we women even deeper from our womb, and have a wholesale reimagination of the relationship between humans within ourselves, between each other, with other species, and the way in which we respect the elementals in the planet.
absolutely. I love that. And when you look at the indigenous cultures and you think about the ceremonies and the rituals and the way that they did things, and or you look at going another step deeper into the level of this regenerative thinking, and you look at how animals or how a deer or a moose graze, and they never overdo it. They just do enough to so that they can come back and it still grows. Taking only what we need, using less, giving more. And the less energy we use, the less power, because our energy is power. And those who hold the power are controlling the world, the energy. And if you use less of that, these energy things to do some of the things that we've been accustomed to do that we think are, oh, we should be able to go to the mall, or we should be able, we should but looking at the bigger impact on that, where it's this small margin of people that get to celebrate in this artificial abundance in the northern hemisphere primarily, that is taking from the southern hemisphere, the inequality, which brings us back to food justice. I think re-educating our children from a very early age and re-educating ourselves right now to learn to love, like you were saying, Kat, from our heart and from our womb, and getting entertainment with, I mean, who plays card games or rides their bicycle, plays spud in the streets or soccer instead of being on a gadget, because the batteries that go into all these electronics are being mined from somewhere. And these batteries are the next nuclear waste, because nobody knows what to do with the waste from these batteries. And I think we really, in this conversation, when we think about the food injustice that's going on in the world and our relationship to that, using technology even as a tool like this is priceless and precious. But do we really need a new iPhone next year? Do we really need a new computer? When we know they have the technology right now. Why once a month, once a year, do we just not get a new chip to put into our phones? A new chip to, put into our computers? What the amount of electronic waste right now is astronomical. So we definitely have to think about those things. And so I think there is more opportunity than ever in the whole time in history for young innovators and elders also to come into the picture in how to create less energy intensive ways of not just eating, but living, enjoying life. Incredible opportunities for that. How do we restructure and rebuild our communities, our downtowns, right? To really accommodate that. Like there's a beautiful guy, Billions for Change, I can't say his name, but he's in my book, and I'll have Till put it on our Facebook group. I mean, he's the guy who created the 5-hour energy drink, and he made millions of dollars. He came from obscure, I think he was from Vietnam, totally broke, came here, made this energy drink, made billions, and he donates 99% of his money back to distributing wealth and resources to people. And one of the most genius things he came up with was this bicycle that if you ride it an hour a day, even in the most impoverished towns, people could light up their homes and cook their food and get exercise. And what if all the gyms were powered that way, right? Like you were saying earlier, Kat, and I love that. Like, how do we localize our energy sources rather than pipelines and trucking our food in? And that's sovereignty, that's taking self-reliance. So go ahead and take that one and run with it. And thank you for letting me share that, because that's deep for me. Like, less is more. Go ahead, Kat.
I just wanted to say, there's a part of me that feels like I just want to mention, these are right now foods that we eat every day that are at risk of not being around in a short amount of time. And I'm pretty sure you're all going to be very familiar with all of these foods: coffee, chocolate, wine. Wineries have been in California have lost 40% of their production from wildfires and drying conditions. Apples, same with almonds, corn, beans, oysters. Oh my goodness, Donna, can you imagine oysters? There were in Chinapoot Bay this year at McBride's Ketchimack Bay Wilderness Lodge. There were no mussels. There were no sea stars. So this is an indication of the health of this bay that Homer, Alaska is situated on, Ketchimack Bay. And by the way, Mike McBride is hoping to work on turning that into a World Heritage Site. So let's talk about that.
Yes.
And then lobster. And then finally maple syrup. So I feel like this moment requires us to be courageous. Like, really, let's see the world the way it is. And it's difficult to do when we are, I think this was really the gift for COVID for me, was just being in complete silence and having no other engagements, just being quiet and noticing the changes, and felt like it reinvigorated my imagination to see the world the way I wanted it to be, instead of the way that I was suffering inside, knowing that it was. From age 2, our historic hotel, the Northwestern Hotel in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, burnt down. So I know in my body what that acrid smell is like. 4 years ago in Homer, Alaska, we had wildfires just down the street in Happy Valley, Donna. And then I came back to my winter home in Colorado, and there were wildfires 10 minutes away. The first, second, and fourth largest fires ever in Colorado's history were happening. So and then 2 weeks ago, the Marshall Fire, in a 6,000 acre area, 991 homes were lost. They had 115-mile-an-hour winds. We were at a 30-year low of precipitation. We had only received 7% of precipitation. My friend said the grass was crunchy to walk on. So all of this is to say, the warning signs are going off. Will
Right.
Rogers, warning, warning, warning. We really must sit up and figure out right now, what can we do right where we're sitting? If you just turn your head 180 degrees and look at the things that surround your life, ask, where did they come from? Who made them? Talk about climate justice. Is our
Value chain.
food being produced by basically slaves? Is our food coming from so far away that people have to be enslaved in ships in order to transport it? What is our food being packaged with? Is it compostable? Will it break down? Are these all things that will continue the cycle of life? We've been tapping out the bank account of life on the planet for sure the last couple of 100 years. 12,000 years ago, Saudi Arabia, they believe, was a rainforest like the Amazon, but they cut trees down so they could build wooden ships. We are now cutting down the Amazon. They say it's 20%, but I have just listened to an expert on the hydrology of the Amazon, and he declares that it's a 40% drop in the vegetation. Trees act like geysers. They pull up the water and create this hydrology that pulls these cycles around the planet. Well, if we lose that, we will absolutely shift climate on the planet. Look, Saudi Arabia does not look like a rainforest today. And even planting 3 billion trees in Ethiopia is not going to change that. So we really have to understand the urgency. We have to understand our part in contributing to the climate breakdown, whether it's how we move. I'm not flying, whether it's what we eat, not eating meat and dairy, whether it's what we wear, haven't bought a new piece of clothing in years, whether it's but these are things right now that are a function of letting go. I want to get to the place on the planet where we can be letting abundance propagate. How can we exponentiate life on the planet? Not necessarily with more human beings, because we have too many of us. The carrying capacity is way over tapped. So how do we change the way we relate with each other in a good way, as the indigenous say? How do we celebrate what we accomplish? How do we celebrate ceremony? How do we bring the sacred into this conversation? How do we eat mindfully rather than just stuffing ourselves and doing something else at the same time? How can we just sit down, prepare a beautiful food, whatever that is? And then if we can, how can we invite someone into our space and share what we have? How can we care so much that when we see someone homeless and hungry on the street, we offer what we have, whatever we have? How can we dare to imagine a heaven in earth rather than some have and most have not?
Kat, I'm so glad we recorded this. I just appreciate, that was just so beautiful. And I also want to say, invite you guys, if you haven't subscribed to our newsletters, I wrote a really pretty thorough blog on solutions and things that we can all do, many of them which Kat just spoke from her heart. And each week, I invite people to contribute, but I love being able to stand on your shoulders, Kat, and have you be able to stand on mine sometimes. And I noticed there's some really excellent things in the chat. I love, actually, my husband, actually, Kevin, if you're still on there, would you come close the door? Speaking of energy, there's been a guy out there blowing the leaves and it's so noisy. But I really want to hear from, we have a question, Robin, you can, if you would come off mute, we would be so delighted to hear from you. And again, Kat, that was beautiful. And I can't wait to replay it.
So
So-
here's my question, and Donna, it's going to blow your mind. So sit still. I don't want to see you blow up when I ask the question, because it goes against everything, but it follows up with what Kat was saying just a moment ago. And it was just something I was thinking about the other day. We've all been part of the slow food movement, talked about how to share meals, bring our families together, get together, have one meal a day, everybody prepare it, sit down, share it, have conversation, right? We hear that over and over and over. But what if so you were talking about what could we do? And I'm thinking of the smallest little thing is, what if we came together after preparing the meal, ideally, let's say together, but realistically, let's say doesn't happen, but everybody sits at the table and they don't talk. And they actually, Donna, I can see Donna going, they actually look at their plate, like they don't have distractions. It is a silent, and I'm thinking of my family, of extended family members, but I'm just saying, like, and they sat and they stared at their plate and they looked at each bite and they thought mindfully, where did this come from? How was this grown? Who touched it? What soil? You know, those things are already planted to think about, and you quietly eat your meal in a totally mindful, almost meditative way. And then you talk about it after. Because when you do that, besides helping your digestive system, I practiced the other day myself. And it was so captivating on how much food we do eat, and trying to imagine the farm worker, you know, picking it in the cold temperatures. I mean, would that help in us having a better understanding of the blessing of the food, where the food comes from, and imagining it feeding, you know, your microbiome cells going, yes, high five, or, you know, it's not, I mean, all those things almost as a game. I mean, you talked about Kat, you know, is fun, and like, just what can we do that's a very small thing? It goes against everything we've always talked about the meal sharing, talking conversation. So I just wanted to throw that out and ask you, because Kat was on that run a minute ago, and Donna, you know, you're famous for creating community around food and health. So go for it. I'll shut up.
But I also want to say how much I appreciate you saying that. And actually, I have a whole blog about that I wrote a couple of years ago about the power of 32 chews and eating in silence. And 32, there's just something about this. It's an ancient number. It goes way back civilizations, where that was the number to chew to, because digestion, actually, I always say, starts in the kitchen, because as soon as you smell something, it comes to your mind. But the 32 chews is like in your mouth, where all the digestive enzymes begin. And it takes that chewing that much to actually break that down. And it really helps having some fermented foods with that, probiotics, fermented foods as you're chewing. And that really is even better. And actually, I love this idea, like, and that's why I'm so excited about bringing you on, Robin, as a guest, to really demonstrate the value chain and that looking at how much we take our whole food system for granted. Just like there's 32 chews, there's at least 32 steps before we even have the opportunity to have 32 chews in our mouths. And we just so much take that for granted. So I also want to, we're at the hour right now, and I really, like, with respect for everybody's time, it's been an hour and I have a couple of announcements. But I want to thank Robin, and if anybody else has some things, Tayl's going to be putting a bunch of resources that I gathered, everything from the Pachamama Alliance to Bioneers, to Slow Foods, Slow Money. Tell you can start putting those in there. And if you don't download the chat, Food Tank, Biomimicry, and then of course, Robin, I see you've got yours in the corner, and I know Kat, you have your book too, even though I didn't read it, but this is a really fabulous book to read. And I have this pile of books. I was going to go over them all in case we had dead air, but we obviously didn't have any dead air here today. And so I'm going to put these books, also a bibliography, in the Facebook group, and I encourage all of you to put anything to the solutions, positive things to add to this conversation. Because one of the things we didn't even touch upon today, which I have another guest I'll be bringing on in about a month, specifically talking about food waste. And we waste about 44% of all food goes to waste. And that is total climate injustice, because the amount of energy that goes into producing our food is top. And if we know that, how can we waste our food? So thanks for putting those in there. Does anybody else have any other questions? Because or would like to add to the discussion? It's so helpful. And then I'd like, Kat, for you to do you already kind of just blew us away with those closing remarks, but I'm sure you have a few more words in there to share with us. And then I have some really cool announcements I want to make. They'll just take a minute or two. And we're getting this is amazing discussions. Thank you, Michaela. I'm just so happy that you're here. So happy everybody's on the call. So anybody else want to raise their hand or have anything else to say before? Like I say, everything will be in the Facebook group. If you're not already on our emailing list, please put your email in here. It'll be confidential, and you'll get a copy of the email, and you'll also get a copy of this recording. And something very, very exciting is not only are these recordings on YouTube now, but we also have them up on podcast. And they're starting to look really snazzy, thanks to TJ, who's on the line. TJ, come off mic and just say hi. She might not, she's shy. TJ, yay, TJ. TJ, yeah. And thanks to Tell for making this all possible. I am so grateful to have a team, and I'm so grateful to have a community like you that comes together to have these deep discussions. And next week, and Kat, I think I'll just, because I'm on these announcements right now, I'll finish them and then let you close down the house. But next week's guest is Dr. Harvey Eckhart. He's going to be talking about immune system building strategies, not just by what we put in our mouth and our minds and our skin, but our environmental immune system building things. And he's been a practicing physician for over almost 40 years. So we ask you to come with your health concerns and questions. And of course, food is always a topic on that. Last week's shows are already up. The talk with Shannon Kelly last week was incredible. So I hope you'll go on YouTube or on our new YouTube, our new Spotify, and we're on all those channels. And Tell, can you put that link? Oh, she put the link in there, and we'll also post that in our Facebook feed. And the last thing I wanted to say was, if you haven't already read my book, Living Like the Future Matters, I'm trying to get this book out to as many people as possible. I'm offering the first 50 pages a download for free. And then when people purchase the book, the bonus that I'm giving with this are huge. All the proceeds for everything that I'm doing are going to help Tell and TJ down in the Philippines after this devastating typhoon. As we all know, the climate is changing, and a lot of it has to do with the way we eat. And these girls eat like saints, and they don't deserve to be humiliated by a corrupt government and horrific storms that are only getting stronger. So everything that you do helps support that. And I think that's all part of the big picture, Kat, that that we've talked about is just like giving back, the haves and the have-nots, and how do we bridge this gap? And I just so appreciate you mentioning that in such a beautiful way. And with that, I think, Tel, you've got all the links going in there. I'd like to invite you, Kat, just to bless us off with some of your elders' wisdom. And looking forward to seeing everybody back here next Thursday, same time, same place. And please invite your friends and family. Okay, Kat, thank you. Take it away.
Yes.
So I feel like this is a moment where we are at a crossroads. Humanity can decide if we are brave and delighted simultaneously while we soberly acknowledge the current state of being within ourselves, the beings on the planet. And how can we change from a know and lack and fear mindset to a yes, like we've got this. Like imagine that. Just like Koltrelnie means remembering forward in Tanana. Imagine we're in 2030 and we look back on 2022. We go, yes, that's how we did it. Step by step by step, heart by heart, voice by voice, hands by hands, feet by feet, womb by womb, women and girls.
Yeah, baby.
We got this.
We got this. Oh, Kat Haber, you are a delight. I absolutely adore you. And I want to thank you again so much for being an honorary guest today on A Dose of Positivity and sharing your brilliance, your light, your love. And I am just honored to have you as my friend and womb sister. And with that, heads up, hands up, remember to breathe. Remember that freedom lies on the other side of fear. And let's go out and take some of these action steps that Kat brought to us, and all of you know in your hearts, and make it a better day as we all live more like the future matters. Kat.
Well, yes. Give me a Y, give me an E, give me an F.
Yes.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again. And thank you, Kevin, for the great Alan Abbey quote in there. That was great. That was, if everybody in Edward Abbey, yeah, Tel, we'll put that in the Facebook group too. Thank you, my love. That is so awesome. Aloha.